Hello, I'm Randy Vasquez, a graduate of the JMC school here at San Jose State. In 2016, the National Football League hosted its first ever opening night here in San Jose Arena. Lauren Hernandez and I were able to cover this media spectacular. It's estimated that over 5,500 journalists from around the world were present at this event. Here's a brief look at what we saw.
It was unlike anything I probably could have ever imagined. You watch it on TV just in terms of the coverage that it gets and how people package it up, but you never really understand how they got there and how what the whole setup is. I think it brings a lot out in people in terms of their personalities and what kind of reporters they are, whether it's print or TV or social media reporters. The game is the game, but it's still entertainment, and I know we get paid, but it's a sport, and we should really take pleasure in doing that. And I think that comes across in your body language if you're there for the same reasons that the guys are, which is you love what you're doing. And I think that today and tonight was really a culmination of all these media members who love what they're doing, and they brought themselves here to be a part of this amazing thing.
We have an audience fundamentally uninterested in football, so we have to make them interested. And so we wanted to come here and ask different questions of the players and make it a little fun and silly. Mostly also wanted to talk about the things they didn't want to talk about because our audience is interested in, for example, performance-enhancing drugs and human growth hormone, peptides, that kind of stuff. So we had to stealthily work in those questions into the interviews. A lot of other journalists here are doing kind of what we're doing, which is not really talking about the game itself. There are a few sports journalists and a lot of people asking them about the elections or their favorite movies and random stuff, which I think, the Super Bowl is universally watched, and so you got to give your viewers a reason to care, and even if they don't like football very much.
What a wonderful opportunity for Randy and for Lauren, who gave us a chance to see inside what it's like on Super Bowl that first night, that opening night. Hello, I'm Bob Rucker, the director of the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at San Jose State. Our motto here is learn by doing, and we thought it would be very important for those of you who want to get into sports reporting or the industry to hear and see what it's really like from the pros. So we've assembled a group of people who have worked in the profession for many years, some of which are graduates. Let's meet our guests.
Hi, I'm Matt Engelberg from Fox Sports, a field producer and a senior assignment manager here covering the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos.
Great, Matt. I'm Henry Wolford, Comcast Sportsnet Bay Area anchor and reporter. Every day is a great day to be a Spartan. Earned my master's in 2000, and I'm ready to talk some sports, Celeste.
Hi, I'm ready to talk too. My name is Celeste Gehring, and I work for Fox Sports, and I am the Vice President of Events and Field Production.
Hello, Mark Spears from Yahoo Sports, San Jose State graduate. Go Raiders.
I'm Dennis Ackerman. I work for Fox Sports. I'm a field producer here covering the Super Bowl, the Carolina Panthers in particular. And I am a proud alum of San Jose State University, class of 1991. And Mark, I'm with you. Go Raiders.
I don't know about that Raiders stuff. But I'm Monique Spencer from Fox Sports. I'm a production coordinator, and I'm a little out of my element here, but go Lakers.
Wow.
Don't you just love our group? And by the way, I'm from Chicago. Go Bears. At any rate, let's talk about that Super Bowl. So many of us dream about it. Oh, I wish I could be there for that opening night for the NFL, to be at that media day. Oh, that would be fantastic. Let's talk to the people who've actually done it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. What's it like being there on opening night?
I mean, it's just total chaos, just getting in there and, thank goodness I got some junk in the trunk, get in there and get the mic flag in there and muscle people out to get those sound bites. I just, what do you guys think? It's just total chaos for us.
Well, leading up to it, there's so much work leading up to it. I mean, and as Matt had said earlier in a different forum, we started about a year ago planning this, hiring crews, making sure that we're credentialed. Okay, there's so many steps to just get to this point in general. And I almost feel like once we get there, it's almost maybe like a breath of relief. Okay, we're here. We know what we do. Now it's like, okay, our natural instincts as journalists, reporters, that kicks in. And from here, okay, we can handle it.
Well, I'm an NBA reporter based in the Bay Area, and I'm stealing off the Super Bowl. I interviewed Stephen Curry last week. about his relationship with Cam Newton, and then Yahoo got some Cam Newton sound bites, and we made a big piece that I did a voiceover over, and actually came from Sacramento today interviewing Jimmy Butler about the Chicago Bulls, about his relationship with Demaryius Thomas. So I'm going to be there Sunday as a fan, actually. I lucked up and was able to get some tickets. But as an NBA reporter, the Super Bowl is so big that I'm still able to steal stuff that is Super Bowl related.
I got a question for you. Just what's it like having the Super Bowl in your own backyard?
A bit overwhelming at time. Similar to Mark, credentials are tight right now. So it's not like every reporter is going to the game. We have Mindy Bach nominated as our national reporter, and then everyone else kind of make sure they have ties to the Super Bowl. So if you're covering the Warriors, make sure you talk to them about the Super Bowl. If you're covering any sport, just try to relate to what people are thinking about. I mean, even though the Warriors have an incredible record right now, what are they thinking about? The biggest game in sports, the Super Bowl right now. So I think if I were out there, I realize that when you're covering this type of event, you're not really enjoying it because you're working it versus actually kicking back saying, I can take this all in and say I attended the Super Bowl. To a certain degree, you don't even remember what happened when the game is over because you're looking for your specific angle on that story.
I gotta echo that. It's all about the preparation. Once you get there, the thrill is not there. You're doing a job. You're there to work. You're there to get the bottom line done, and that's really what it's all about.
We have some students here in our audience that would like to ask some questions. Let's start with Andrew. Andrew, what do you want to know about Super Bowl and the coverage?
So I just want to know, like, the amount of pressure that is put on you. How do you deal with that? And what are the kind of go-to questions that you ask people when you are interviewing?
Well, I can handle the interviewing part. I think it all depends on which teams are in it. As for example, the Broncos and the Panthers, these are the two teams in the Super Bowl, and I think you have to, first of all, you have to see who's available that day. They don't make all the players available for the first couple days. You have to see who they've made available and what kind of questions you're going to gear specifically toward them. Yes, you can ask the generic question, what's it like to be here, such and such like that, but you have to do your research to know these teams, to know these players. What are your storylines going into the game? What do you want to talk about? What do your reporters want to talk about that night for your show? So that's what you have to kind of gear it towards.
I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure for anybody that's working the Super Bowl. I mean, anything can happen. You can't go in there just with a set of questions because something like last year can happen where we're all waiting in the tunnel to go out on the field, and instead of throwing the ball or running the ball, the opposite happens and you got to change your plan up real quick. So you just got to be ready for the unexpected.
I think one big thing is to kind of plan ahead. For example, when I go to the NBA All-Star Weekend, which is coming up, I know somebody from the NBA who'll show me the paper where LeBron is sitting during the press conference or where Kevin Durant is sitting. So I know before everybody else, or at least I try to, and then I'll go stand by that table or stand where Kevin Durant's going to be or LeBron's going to be and kind of get ahead. And you realize that you're probably only going to get 2 questions in when it's like a cluster like that. So I didn't curse. So if you got 2 questions, they better be 2 good ones. You get what you need and then move on.
You'll hear about a lot of people that's been around the block and they say, oh, pressure, I've been doing this my entire life. Yeah, right. I mean, I don't care who you are. The bottom line is when sports gets to this level and this amount of significance, you're going to feel some type of butterflies in your stomach. You realize that you're being looked at underneath a magnifying glass. And if anyone in your market is beating you to the punch on the stories, other things related to the Super Bowl, you're going to have a lot of problems with management here. You're not going to say, oh, it's okay, we understand. I mean, who cares if Peyton Manning broke his pinky finger? You're going to have their head, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with us, everything has to run so smoothly. And like you said, it's about all the preparation beforehand. And we talked about this earlier in a class. We have, situation 1, 2, 3, 4. And when situation 1 blows up, we go to situation 2 and 3 and 4. And we have all these contingency plans to make everything work. And with all those contingency plans, stuff still happens that you just have to roll with and just trust yourself and go with it.
It's not that different than being on a team. I think use the pressure to make you work harder, use the pressure to wake you up in the middle of the night with that disaster scenario that you then can cover and plan for. And just like a player, they might say, I'm not nervous before the Super Bowl, but of course, like you said, everybody gets nervous. If you're not getting nervous before the Super Bowl, then you probably shouldn't be there.
Right.
Well, and then I'm also competitive, so I'm trying to get something that nobody else has. And so I think as a reporter, a lot of times you got to do your research. You got to read up on all the stars. You got to read up on scrubs. There might be a great story on the practice squad, but if to me a key of a great journalist is somebody that can find a story that the masses can't think of.
How much research do you do going into, like, say, your All-Star game, or even Jimmy Butler, for example? You went and interviewed. How much research do you do doing something like that?
Read old stories, talk to people who know them, get ideas, and then boom, things hit. So in a lot of ways, it's who you know, what you read, and I try to be creative, and I don't know if anybody else is doing the Jimmy Butler story, but I am, and I hope not.
We have another question here from Shaylin.
Okay, so my question is, like, what are your hours? What are your hours, and then just your sleep schedule?
Good question.
You want to go
Do
down
we
the line?
actually sleep? That's the question, right?
Yeah, there's no hours is the answer. It's 24 hours.
It really is.
It is a good question, though. But
It's 24/7, I feel like, especially today. We talked about in class social media with Twitter and Instagram and everything. It really is 24/7. I mean, for example, during the NFL season, I was gone 13 out of 17 weekends. And 2 of those are travel days, and then you cover your game, and then your week starts over on Tuesday getting ready for the next one. So you are married to this job. You really are.
Right.
So,
I would say if you want a 9-to-5 job, be a banker.
there's a paranoia to a certain degree that you're going to miss something. And that's why it's great to have a large crew. Even though the entire crew may not have credentials that get them inside the game, you got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. You got to work different shifts. You got to cover each other's back. So the typical person covering the Super Bowl, whether you're on camera or behind the scene, at least 10 hours is what I would imagine for most stations and networks out there. You're not going to do a 4-hour shift. It's not going to happen. And you're not going to do an 8-hour shift. 10 to 12 hours at least.
Yeah, just for example, our day began at 6 a.m. and it'll end probably around 7:30 tonight.
Very good. Another question here from Darby.
So my question to you, well, Mark in particular, it's like I've read a lot of your stuff over the years. Like, you are able to build like relationships with a bunch of people, like players, coaches, even sometimes like even team executives. Like, how do you go by building those relationships and building a strong list of contacts?
It takes time. And I mean, I think a lot of things come into factor. One, I used to play, so I have connections with people because I used to play college basketball. 2, I talk to everybody from the guy that sweeps the floor to the CEO. I treat them all the same because you never know when somebody will tell you something, when someone will give you an idea. But, I make it a point to try to get to know as many players as possible. I mean, how many players do you know that at one point they weren't that good and then end up being a superstar? Or now, me being older, I even went to a high school basketball game last Saturday to see Josh Jackson, the #1 basketball player in the country. Why? Well, if you're #1 in the country, you're probably going to make it to the NBA level. So it's better for me to build a relationship with him when he's 17 years old, 18 years old, than when everybody's trying to build a relationship with him at 20.
In 2 years, he's going to be in the NBA with the way
Exactly.
everything's structured today, the one and dones.
So my days of being in the club and, hey, it just so happens to be Carmelo's here over, so I got to be more creative and try to get these players when they're young.
Question here from a young man who has an insight I think we want to hear about.
Okay, so with last year's Super Bowl, with the deal with Marshawn Lynch not talking to the media, how do y'all deal with someone who likes to joke around or doesn't take the media very seriously?
Good question, Kellen. How do you deal with those
I think
difficult
that's an
players?
opportunity, personally. It's an opportunity to own it, to get something creative, to get something different. I mean, if you look at Fox Sports, how many fun things we did with the Marshawn Lynch, I'm just here so I don't get fined scenario. I mean, it was a joke, but we made it funny and we made it entertaining, and sports is ultimately about entertaining people, and we made it entertaining. We used that. to be honest, that's more, you get more juice out of that than somebody who gives a boring, standard, cliche answer every time, I feel like.
I don't feel like it's any extra pressure on us either, because our purpose is not to make the news, it's to deliver the news. So you are who they say you are. You're going to do what they're telling you to do, which is go out there, ask your questions, don't allow them to take you off your game, and their soundbite is their soundbite. I mean, Denny Green had one of the greatest sound bites of all time, you know, and sometimes you just bump into that sound bite. It was only a few words. It's a little catchy phrase. Herm Edwards had a catchy phrase, you know. As long as you hold your ground and ask your questions, you never know what type of sound bite you're going to bump into,
you know,
and it'd be a memorable one.
For me, it kind of bothered me. I'll be honest. Like, I kind of get tired of it. It's like, now, okay, now you can talk in the commercials. You know, you have a job to do, and part of your job is to promote your team, and you're at the highest level. So to sit there and just say, I'm doing this because I won't get fined, it's, I think it's bad for the team. It's bad for him. It's bad for us. I mean, you get paid to just answer some questions. Like, how it amazes to me some of the divaness that comes along with these jobs sometimes, but when they're done playing, they can't help to want to talk every day, you know. So to me, it was I was kind of turned off by it.
But you know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to add, Dennis, is this: Marshawn Lynch is being real.
Yeah.
He's not big with the media. I got two boys who play football, who've gone to Marshawn Lynch's camp back-to-back years. He's a very outspoken guy. He gives back to the community. He makes a barbecue for them. I saw the kids who were less fortunate with the worst cleats out there. He brought in 50 to 70 pairs of Nike cleats. Because he addressed them the right way, I don't have a problem with it.
But I'm not
frustrating
saying
for the
he's
media,
not
but
a great guy.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious he does a lot of fantastic stuff in the community, but I mean, it's talking. You know what I mean? It's not like he's shy. It's your job. I just think it's silly.
But Mark, you NBA locker rooms, you know you can go in an NBA locker room, you got 12 guys. All 12 aren't going to be good talkers. You got some 3 to 4 main guys you can go to. Some guys are going to be just okay.
Who was the biggest star of that game at the end? Like the biggest
Well, I mean,
story?
but you got Russell,
Lynch.
but you also have Russell Wilson. You also got a lot of the big names on that team and good talkers. Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman. So,
but then did he give an interview to Deion Sanders?
No, not really. I mean, he wasn't as rude or maybe as evasive as he was with reporters. But Marshawn didn't give anyone anything.
He's a fantastic guy. I'm sure his barbecue is great. You know,
great,
I live in Oakland, so I do root for him.
Gave me a pair of cleats too because mine were too old. No, but
I know because yours the same size as a kid. But I just think as a professional, as an athlete, that's part of your job. You know that when you're a kid, you're practicing doing interviews. Just answer some questions. If you don't like the question, say next question. I'd rather not answer it. I think it's just silly.
Eddie Murray didn't do interviews with Baltimore.
No, that's not true.
That is
true. He did. Well, he talked to me.
Well, you must have been extremely nice to him. Oscar Robertson wasn't big on interviews. You know, there are a lot of guys.
That's the reporter's fault.
How is that the reporter's fault?
I was able to get him to talk.
I was too, but I don't blame the guy for refusing to speak to a scrum of reporters.
They should have figured it out.
It seems like there's a frustration level, and that's where we got to draw that line. Is because, you know what? My parents used to tell me something. If you can't accept the answer no, then don't ask. And if you're asking this guy would you like to talk, and he's clearly saying no, if you're dumb enough to hold a microphone in front of his face for the 5 minutes he has to speak, then that says something about the reporter, not about the athlete.
Well, like Stacey Augmon, for example. Now, he was an alleged gang member, so I think a lot of people are like, okay, we'll leave him alone. He didn't want to speak, right? But when he had a great game with the Hawks, he spoke. And that was fine. I respected that. So I don't think Marshawn Lynch should talk every day, but it's a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's an important occasion. Just pick and choose your spots. There's a lot of NBA players that Kevin Garnett didn't like to speak every day, but after a game, he spoke.
But we're comfortable in front of the camera. Not everyone's that way, you know?
And Mark, don't you feel like we got more out of it by him saying
TV
that
did.
line? because
Okay.
we're
TV.
talking
All right.
about it
Yeah,
now,
I
aren't we?
think
That's fair.
And if he had just said,
I'm Brent. See,
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Right. Casual because we can just go. He
Right.
just puts his
Better,
hat there.
it's
and
a better
says,
TV story.
Yeah.
Right.
It
I
was a
think
great
it's
TV
different
story.
on
Right.
different
Brought viewers
platforms.
to us.
enjoyed it.
Trent,
And like you said, we only ask the questions of the players. We're not trying to put everybody in a box. Not everybody is going to be as succinct as everybody else, and it's important to just report on the players. So if Marshawn doesn't want to talk, that's the story, that he's not talking. And again, I really feel like we wouldn't be talking about it right now had he just answered every question with a cliche, you know,
wouldn't be no
one
reason
game
to.
at a time, and Bill Belichick is another example of that.
But-
a guy that doesn't give people what they want to hear,
He
and
gives
we make a story
cliches,
out
but
of it.
but it's still right.
Well, let me
Because you
interrupt
have
and
to.
say, you know the old expression also, turnabout is fair play. Courtney, you have a question.
What does it take to get where you guys are? How do I get your job?
I think it,
well, there's no easy answer. I think everybody, you know, Mark's print. I'm behind the scenes. Henry's in front of the camera. Celeste is management. So I think everybody has their own unique story of how they got to where they are. I don't know if Henry, you always wanted to be on camera. I don't know if you always wanted to be in print. You know, I don't know if you always want to do what you do. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do since I was 7 or 8 years old. I knew I wanted to work in TV, and I knew I wanted to work in sports. I didn't know I wanted to be a field producer. It just kind of got me here. So I think everybody's got their own individual, unique story of how they got to where they are now.
I think the advice I'd give to you guys is, and this is when I was here, I got as many internships as possible.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
good too.
I've been talking about that a lot.
I went to the San Jose Metro is still here, right? I went into the San Jose Metro and said, hey, can I write for you guys for free?
Wow.
And write sports for you. And they had weekly newspapers and neighborhood newspapers that had no sports. And that was my first thing I did. I wrote for them. I wrote for the Spartan Daily. I ended up through the National Association of Black Journalists, the only place that gave me my first internship. I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, did an internship there. From there, I met Bud Geraci, who is sports editor of the San Jose Mercury News now. I covered high school sports for him. And then I ended up, working for the San Jose Mercury News and interning at the Dallas Morning News. So by the time I graduated from San Jose State, I was like a first-round NBA pick as far as experience-wise, because most of my colleagues, most of the kids I went to San Jose State with weren't doing half the stuff I was doing, and most of them aren't in the business.
And tell the truth, Mark, Grand Rapids was a challenge. I lived in Grand Rapids for 3 years, the Grand Rapids Press. There's a cultural shock to a certain degree, and you will be challenged. Your patience will be pushed. But when you're so dedicated, absolutely, you're going to be that person. Once you get that foot in the door, things get easier as long as you continue to work hard.
But even then, you have to be creative. I was like, hey, I'm going to family reunion in St. Louis. Can I go cover the U.S. Olympic Festival, which doesn't exist no more? And I got a one-on-one interview with this boxer who kept giving me these little juice boxes. He was so excited about his juice boxes. His name was Floyd Mayweather.
Yes, sir.
So,
from Grand Rapids.
And I did a Detroit Lions thing and a Cubs thing. So I used that internship to go to the next thing. And so, in a nutshell, just get as many internships, as much as experience as possible to separate yourself from the world.
Let me interject here that Alex has a question about working together as a crew.
So regarding teamwork, how do you communicate with your crew efficiently to get your production done?
We are all using GroupMe currently. So we're all on GroupMe and communicating what's been done, what's not been done, what player we're getting, what's being fed to Los Angeles, what still needs to be fed. And we have meetings all the time. So a lot of it is communication and preparation beforehand. Like I said, we prepare all the time beforehand. Hey, this is what you're gonna do, this is what I'm gonna do, just to make sure that our roles are clear. Because when you get into that moment where it's just kind of chaos, everyone just needs to have their role and know what their role is.
And it's not always harmony. One thing I learned as being in front of the camera, when things aren't working, talent should be the first person to gradually start taking a step back. It's the producer's show. A lot of talent can't grasp that notion, but it's the producer's show. Even though they're not our direct boss, they're calling the shots. Now, the best producers want to brainstorm with you, but if you're being difficult, you're better off just being silent. Would you agree with that, Celeste?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of talent these days really don't include their producers in the teamwork method and really bouncing story ideas off. And I just think, you're just so much stronger as a team than you are as an individual. So I love that you said that about producers and you're giving us some love behind the scenes, because we do work really hard to make the talent look good, and we do care, and our best, we know that, we were talking about this earlier, you speak so eloquently and you guys can throw the words out. Some of us can't do that as well, and we want you guys to be able to tell the story.
I think, Henry, one of our jobs is to make the talent look as good as possible. I mean, we also have, as a field producer, we have a lot of different roles. I mean, we're handling the crews, we're handling the logistics, we're dealing with, the studio back in Los Angeles. I'm also dealing with the talent. And at the end of the day, I'm responsible for all of it. I really am. And everything goes well, I don't hear a thing, because then I know I've done my job and I've done it well. But if something goes wrong, then I'm going to hear about it. And I'm man enough, okay, I messed up or something went wrong. Yeah, it's on me, and I'll learn from it. We'll get it right the next time. But my job, I feel, is to make sure that talent and everybody else does their job as best as possible.
I have a picture from yesterday where Monique's actually plugging into the mall box on the ground, stretched out. I mean, she was getting in there and doing a good job.
Yeah, I think communication, when you include everyone, then usually things go a lot smoother. You leave that one person out that, is the decision maker, and we see it all the time. People do one-offs, email, text, phone calls, talking in person, it gets crazy out there in the field. So, you probably, we've got all our phones hidden right now, but everyone's phone is probably going off right now. So, communication is one of the biggest things, especially when you're out in the field and you're working on something big like the Super Bowl.